1 in 11.5 million. That was the mathematical probability of what you're about to see. To put it in perspective, you have a better chance of being struck by lightning. But on March 14, 2019, in an ordinary city, two completely separate lives collided. Not by fate, not by design, through a sequence of micro-decisions that no one realized they were making. What makes this extraordinary isn't just the math. It's the fact that if you went back in time just 3 minutes, none of this would have happened. And two people would never have discovered something impossible about their own lives. This story has 3 layers. A woman who almost missed a train, a man who chose the wrong coffee shop, and a coincidence that connected them 30 years in the past. Let's start at the beginning, but not the obvious beginning. Laura Hoffman, 34 years old, graphic designer in Berlin. March 14th, 7:42 in the morning. She was running late. Nothing serious, just a few minutes, but enough to consider taking the next train instead of rushing. She hesitated at her front door. Should she take the 8 o'clock train, guaranteed, no stress, or run to catch the 7:55? It was a 3-second decision. She decided to run. In that moment, Laura had no idea she was activating a sequence of events that had been delayed for 30 years. On the other side of the city, Thomas Bergman, 62 years old, retired engineer, was sitting in a coffee shop. It wasn't the coffee shop he usually went to. His regular place was closed for renovation. So, for the first time in 8 years, he walked into a different one. Laura made it onto the train. The door closed 4 seconds later. Thomas ordered a cappuccino. It took 6 minutes. While he waited, he decided to read the newspaper someone had left on the table. Neither of them knew they were 11 minutes away from each other, and that an old photograph was about to change everything. Laura gets off at Friedrichstrasse station at 8:14. She needs coffee before her meeting. She walks into the first place she sees. It's the same coffee shop where Thomas is still sitting. Thomas turns the page of the newspaper. It's a special supplement. 30 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall. There are historic photos, people celebrating, families reunited. And then he sees something. A photo from 1989, taken at Alexanderplatz. In the bottom right corner, almost out of focus, there's a woman holding a child. Thomas recognizes the woman immediately. It's his sister, who died in 2003. But what freezes him isn't seeing his sister. It's the child in her arms, a little girl, about 4 years old. He never knew she had a daughter. At that moment, Laura sits down at the next table. She looks at the newspaper and sees the same photo. Laura murmurs something. Thomas hears it. She says, "That's me." Thomas turns, looks at her. "What?" "That child in the photo. That's me. My mother told me about that day." Silence. Thomas, his voice trembling, asks, "Who was your mother?" Laura says the name. Thomas doesn't breathe for 3 seconds. "That was my sister." What they discovered in that coffee shop changed everything. Thomas's sister, Katrin, had gotten pregnant in 1984 in East Germany. The father was a political dissident. He was arrested. Katrin was afraid to tell her family. She hid the pregnancy. After the fall of the wall, she fled to the West with Laura. Cut off contact, out of shame, out of trauma. Thomas searched for her for years. When they finally reconnected, Katrin never mentioned having a daughter. Let's look at the numbers. For this meeting to happen, Laura needed to miss her usual train. Probability, approximately 12%. Thomas needed to go to a different coffee shop. Probability? Approximately 5%. That coffee shop needed to be exactly that one. 1 in 47 in the area. The newspaper that day needed to have that specific photo. 1 in over 300 archive photos. They needed to be there at the same moment, within an 8-minute window. Combined probability, approximately 1 in 11.5 million. Laura grew up not knowing who her father's family was. Thomas lived 30 years not knowing he had a niece. In that coffee shop, in 11 minutes, 2 incomplete stories became one. They didn't just meet. They recovered decades of memories, photos, stories that Katrin never had the chance to share. Thomas gave Laura something she never had: roots. Laura gave Thomas something he thought he'd lost forever: family. Stories like this force us to rethink 3 things. First, there's no such thing as a truly insignificant decision. Second, chance isn't random. It's just math we haven't seen yet. Third, sometimes the universe doesn't prevent coincidences. It archives them and delivers them at the right moment. This story is real. It happened. It was documented. Laura and Thomas still talk. Every week. She now knows stories about her mother she never imagined existed. He has someone to leave his sister's memories with. And it all started with an almost missed train and the wrong coffee shop. If you pay attention to your own life, you might realize you've already experienced something similar. Not on this scale, but with this feeling that something impossible simply happened. And that's what makes life more interesting than any fiction. It doesn't need to make sense. It just needs to happen.